Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening. Well, all the principal official engagements of the Prime Minister were concluded today. This included some very comprehensive and intensive discussions with His Excellency President Prabowo today morning, basically focused on how to take forward our comprehensive partnership. There was also an address to Parliament. Briefly, he also was received by the Indian community reception. That is where we are just coming back from, on which His Excellency President Prabowo made a special gesture and attended himself in person, which was a great honor for the community, for the Prime Minister, and for all of us in the delegation. Tomorrow, as you know, Prime Minister will go along with President Prabowo to inaugurate the conservation project that India and Indonesia will be collaborating on at the Prambanan Temple in Yogyakarta. About today, so much has happened that it's really quite difficult to summarize everything in one place. The day was full of friendship, emotion, apart from the hard work, a lot of bonhomie, a lot of color, a lot of energy were observed. It started, of course, with the formal ceremony at the Mardana Palace, at the Presidential Palace. But it was clear to all of us in the delegation that this was much more than just state protocol. It's difficult to describe it in its entirety, because there were the presence of young children welcoming the Prime Minister, created an ambience in that entire formal protocol setup that the Prime Minister, as he commented, goes back with really warm memories of this. I'm sorry that I cannot be more articulate, because it was quite an unusual state visit welcome. And I think both the Prime Minister as well as his delegation were really overwhelmed by this warmth that was displayed by the President personally, and of course by the Indonesian children who were present at that ceremony. But coming to the work part, the Prime Minister and President Prabowo had discussions both in a restricted format and in delegation levels. Some discussions also took place during the banquet lunch where they were sitting together. On the margins of these talks, several bilateral agreements have been concluded. There are so many that I'm not going to list them all out, because they've been shared with you as part of the press release. Suffice it to say that since President Prabowo visited India last year during our Republic Day celebrations, to now, a lot of work has happened, and the discussions today, some part of it represented a culmination of decisions that were taken in his last visit. But the focus now was on what the forward-looking agenda will be for our comprehensive partnership across all the 6 main areas that characterize our bilateral relations, starting from security and defense, maritime cooperation, the area of developing the people-to-people civilizational connect, the decision to actively share each other's development experience, because we are both very large countries. Our governments are involved in development work, getting our populations who are, who are afflicted by poverty out and giving them better quality of life. So there was a lot of exchange on that. There was also discussions on how India and Indonesia could collaborate at the international level to strengthen the voice of Global South. Working at the UN, working in new formats like the BRICS, which have become very important in the changing global environment. In fact, the Prime Minister described this new vision for the collaboration between India and Indonesia in a speech to the Parliament. And he invited the Indonesian parliamentarians to share in the process of what he termed as the Ganga Mahakam vision for Indonesia's comprehensive strategic partnership over the next 25 years, to describe the type of work that must be undertaken going forward. Coming to more specifics, the discussions on defense and security were fairly significant. As you know, we already have a fairly comprehensive defense collaboration going on, but mainly restricted to cooperation activities between our militaries. So in today's discussions, there was a focus on how we can upgrade that to include collaboration between our defense industries. As you know, Indian defense industry have acquired a fair amount of maturity and technological sophistication in certain areas, which are of interest to the Indonesian side. So there were discussions on how we could now create the framework within which our defense companies can start collaboration with each other and bring the defense industries closer to each other. In this regard, there was discussions on shipping, there were discussions on weapon systems, there were discussions on, I think for that suffices. Then we also spoke about cooperation in the missile domain. So, and expanding cooperation in this area was also discussed as part of the collaboration between our industries. Naturally, these are commercial matters, so it's not something that's discussed in its commercial details. I know there's a considerable amount of interest on that. In the maritime cooperation domain, you will recall that when Prime Minister visited Indonesia in 2018, both countries had unveiled a shared vision on maritime cooperation. So there were discussions on taking that vision forward. The vision of 2018 actually covers all areas of maritime cooperation. So in today's discussions, there was a discussion on how we could collaborate in the area of expanding our mutual maritime domain awareness. In this regard, we are very pleased to know that the decision has been taken for Indonesia to place a liaison officer in the Indian Ocean Region Fusion Center in Gurugram in India. There was also discussions on enhancing maritime connectivity. As the Prime Minister remarked, our capitals may be separated by thousands of kilometers, but we are maritime neighbors. There's a distance of 150 kilometers between two of our islands in Andaman Nicobar and the closest island in Indonesia. There was a discussion on enhancing collaboration between our coast guards. In fact, on the sidelines of these discussions, an MOU has been signed to renew the collaboration activities between our coast guards. There was also interest expressed by the Indonesian side in the Great Nicobar Island project that India is doing, and we we evinced interest, the Prime Minister evinced interest in the development of Sabang port as well. If you recall in 2018, when the shared vision was brought out, both sides had established a joint task force. So the discussions talked about taking forward that process. Already 2 meetings have taken place, and we hope that a third meeting will take place shortly this year. The Prime Minister and the President also discussed how to expand our economic collaboration. As you know, we have set a goal for ourselves. Currently, bilateral trade is at around $25 billion, which doesn't reflect the size of our economies, the size of our markets. So discussions centered around taking forward cooperation in areas such as critical minerals, in joining our innovation ecosystems, in getting our digital infrastructure to collaborate, so that, there was a discussion on how to link our payment systems, our digital payment systems to the Indonesian payment systems. There were discussions on expanding cooperation in the pharmaceutical industry in that area. As you know, India is known as the pharmacy of the world. Indonesia has an elaborate public health system that requires high quality drugs at low prices. So this was identified as a potential area of collaboration. There were other areas like food processing. We talked about mining, critical minerals. That was the economic front. Both sides also acknowledged that this is not simply a relationship between two countries, but it is a relationship at the people-to-people level that goes back several centuries. Tomorrow's program in Prambanan Temple is part of that process to expand the people-to-people connect. In this regard, was also discussion on expanding our links between universities. In fact, on the sidelines, an agreement seems to have been made for 2 of our top-line universities to establish campuses in Indonesia. And broadly, that covers the conversations that happened today in this very intense, action-packed day. It's difficult to summarize everything that happened, actually. But what I can say is that it was an unusual summit. The Prime Minister was extremely warmly received by the President. The hospitality, the warmth, the friendship was very overwhelming. And in fact, in a surprise development, the Prime Minister was accorded the highest honor that is given, which was a great honor in recognition of the work he has been doing to strengthen our bilateral relations.
तो आप देख रहे थे जकार्ता से प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी की इंडोनेशिया यात्रा पर विदेश मंत्रालय की यह प्रेस वार्ता थी, जिसमें विदेश मंत्रालय ने बताया कि किस तरह से दूसरे दिन की तमाम मुलाकातों और उन्होंने कहा कि एक तरह से पूरा दिन व्यस्तताओं से भरा हुआ था, भावनाओं और ऊर्जा से भरा हुआ था। तमाम समझौतों का जिक्र किया। भारत और इंडोनेशिया के बीच कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप को एक दूसरे स्तर पर ले जाने के लिए 6 महत्वपूर्ण क्षेत्रों में किस तरह से सहयोग को आगे बढ़ाएंगे, उस पर चर्चा हुई, जिसमें शामिल है रक्षा, मैरीटाइम सिक्योरिटी, साथ ही सभ्यतागत जो जुड़ाव है उसको और किस तरह से मजबूत किया जाए, रक्षा क्षेत्र के उद्योगों के बीच में सहयोग को मजबूत किया जाए, इस पर जोर दिया गया दोनों ही नेताओं के द्वारा। साथ ही साथ ग्लोबल